While buying jewelry for her husband, the millionaire was shocked when she saw the salesgirl's birthmark. The same mark her daughter had when she vanished 20 years ago. Beverly Hills, December 2000. Diana Sterling's Manolo Blahnik heels clicked confidently across Tiffany's polished marble floor. Her Chanel suit and perfectly styled hair reflected in the glass cases filled with sparkling diamonds. A far cry from the poverty she'd known 20 years ago. "I'd like to see your finest anniversary collections," she told the young salesgirl, barely looking up from her phone as she texted her husband Robert about dinner plans. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling. Let me show you our newest pieces." Something in the girl's voice made Diana look up. The salesgirl, Sarah according to her name tag, was reaching up to a high shelf, her blazer shifting slightly. That's when Diana saw it. A small birthmark on her shoulder, shaped exactly like a butterfly. Diana's designer purse crashed to the floor. The room began to spin as 20-year-old memories flooded back. Cleveland, 1980. "Just one more push, Diana." The nurse's voice seemed far away as 19-year-old Diana Bennett gripped the hospital bed rails. Her mother, Ellen, had died just 3 days ago after a brutal battle with cancer. Now here she was, alone, giving birth in the same hospital. "She's beautiful," the nurse said moments later, holding up the crying infant. "Look, she has a unique birthmark, just like a little butterfly." Diana's tears fell as she traced the mark on her daughter's shoulder. In just a few hours, she would have to give this precious baby up for adoption. Her trailer park home had been repossessed after her mother's death. She had no job, no money, no family. "Are you sure about this, my child?" Pastor John asked gently, standing beside her bed. He'd been her mother's pastor for years. "I have to give her a better life," Diana whispered, her heart breaking. "Promise me you'll find her. A good Christian family who will love her like I would." "I promise," Pastor John said solemnly. "I know just the couple, good people who've been praying for a child." Diana held her baby one last time, memorizing every detail of her tiny face. "I'll make something of myself," she vowed quietly. "One day, I'll be worthy of you." Then she watched through tears as Pastor John carried her daughter away, the little butterfly birthmark disappearing through the hospital doors. Beverly Hills, 2000 hours. "Mrs. Sterling! Mrs. Sterling, can you hear me?" Diana's eyes fluttered open to find herself on Tiffany's floor, surrounded by concerned faces. Sarah the salesgirl knelt beside her, butterfly birthmark clearly visible now. "The paramedics are on their way," someone said. Diana's phone buzzed, Robert calling, probably worried about their dinner plans. But she couldn't look away from Sarah's face. After 20 years of building her real estate empire, of proving herself worthy, here was her daughter, right in front of her. The same heart-shaped face, the same determined chin, and that birthmark. The exact same mark she'd memorized 2 decades ago in a Cleveland hospital room. "I'm fine," Diana managed to say, struggling to sit up even as her world tilted on its axis. "Just haven't eaten today." But her eyes kept returning to Sarah's concerned face as sirens wailed in the distance. After 20 years of wondering, of working herself to the bone to become someone her daughter could be proud of, here she was. And Sarah had no idea who Diana really was. As the paramedics rushed in, Diana made a silent vow, just as she had in that hospital room 20 years ago. She would find a way to be part of Sarah's life. But this time, she would do it right. This time, she would be worthy of her daughter's love. She just had to figure out how to do it without losing everything and everyone she'd built her new life around. Cleveland, 1980. "Clean it again, Mr. Peterson," barked at Diana, pointing to a spot on the real estate office floor. "And this time, do it right." Diana gripped the mop tighter, fighting back tears. 6 months after giving up her baby, she was working as a cleaning lady at Peterson & Associates Real Estate, taking night classes and sleeping just 4 hours a night. "Yes, sir," she replied quietly, watching him stride back to his corner office in his expensive suit. One day, she promised herself, she'd have an office like that. One day, she'd prove him wrong. Late that night, after everyone had left, Diana studied the sales contracts left on the desks. She'd borrowed real estate textbooks from the library, learning everything she could about the business. Property values, market trends, negotiation tactics. "What are you doing?" Diana jumped. Margaret Sterling, one of the firm's wealthy clients, stood in the doorway. "I was just cleaning," Diana said quickly. Margaret's eyes narrowed, noticing the open contracts. But instead of reporting her, she just smiled mysteriously and walked away. The next day changed everything. A difficult client stormed into the office, furious about a house he'd been shown. "This is unacceptable," he shouted at the receptionist. "I've seen 20 houses and none of them are right." Diana, mopping nearby, gathered her courage. "Excuse me, sir? I might know of a property you'd like." Peterson emerged from his office, frowning. "Get back to work," he snapped at Diana. But the client was intrigued. Let her talk. Diana described a historic house she'd noticed during her bus rides to night school. It needed work but had incredible potential. The client's eyes lit up with interest. "Take me there," he demanded. Despite Peterson's protests, Diana showed the house. 2 hours later, she had negotiated her first sale, earning more in commission than she made in 6 months of cleaning. Peterson was livid but couldn't deny her success. Within a year, Diana had become the firm's top agent, specializing in transforming rundown properties into gold mines. By 1990, she had opened her own agency in a struggling neighborhood. She saw potential where others saw poverty. One renovation led to another. Soon, entire blocks were transformed. That's when she met Robert Sterling at a property auction. He was handsome, successful, from old money. She was self-made, driven, and hiding her past. "You're different from other real estate agents," he told her on their first date. If only he knew how different, Diana thought. Their wedding in 1995 was Beverly Hills' social event of the year. Diana Bennett became Diana Sterling, joining one of California's most prestigious families. But Margaret Sterling, Robert's mother, watched the bride with knowing eyes. She'd never forgotten that night in Peterson's office, seeing a cleaning lady studying contracts by lamplight. "Welcome to the family," Margaret said at the reception, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'm sure you'll fit right in." Diana smiled back, not knowing that Margaret had already hired private investigators to dig into her past. For 5 years, Diana lived her dream life. She had wealth, status, a loving husband. But every time she saw a butterfly, her heart ached for the baby she'd given up. Now, lying in a hospital bed after her collapse at Tiffany's, Diana faced a choice. She had found her daughter, but telling the truth could cost her everything. "Mrs. Sterling?" A nurse entered with discharge papers. "Your husband is here." Diana closed her eyes, remembering Sarah's butterfly birthmark. Some secrets, she realized, couldn't stay buried forever. The question was, who would pay the price when the truth finally came out? Beverly Hills Hospital buzzed with afternoon activity as Diana sat on the edge of her bed, waiting for discharge. Robert had been called away for an emergency board meeting, leaving her alone with her thoughts. A knock on the door made her look up. Sarah Cooper, still in her Tiffany's uniform, stood hesitantly in the doorway. "Mrs. Sterling? I brought your purse. You left it when—" Sarah paused. "When you fainted." "Thank you," Diana said softly, studying the face that had haunted her dreams for 20 years. "Please, come in." Sarah stepped inside, fidgeting with her name badge. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You really scared us." "I'm fine. Just low blood sugar," Diana lied, her heart racing. "Sarah, isn't it? Tell me about yourself." "Oh, there's not much to tell. I'm working at Tiffany's to pay for business school. My dad's a teacher and mom's a nurse. We can't afford tuition, so—" "Admirable," Diana said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Your parents must be proud." "They are. They've always supported me, even though I'm adopted." Diana's hands gripped the hospital blanket. "Adopted?" "Yes, as a baby. I've always known. My parents believe in honesty." Sarah smiled. "I was very lucky. The Coopers are wonderful people." Before Diana could respond, her phone rang. Pastor John's name flashed on the screen. "Excuse me," she told Sarah. "I need to take this." Sarah nodded and left, leaving Diana alone with a voice from her past. "Diana, we need to talk," Pastor John said urgently. "It's about the adoption papers from 1980. Diana's blood ran cold. "What about them?" "There were irregularities. The agency is being investigated. If anyone starts digging—" He paused. "We need to meet." After hanging up, Diana did what she did best. She took action. Within hours, her private investigator had a file on the Cooper family. Tom Cooper, Vietnam veteran, high school math teacher, suffering from PTSD. Mary Cooper, oncology nurse, breast cancer survivor. Sarah, straight-A student, working part-time, dating someone named James Peterson. Diana froze at the last name. Peterson. It couldn't be. Further investigation confirmed her fears. James was the son of her old boss, the man, who had humiliated her when she was a cleaning lady. Meanwhile, at the Sterling mansion, Margaret watched her daughter-in-law through narrowed eyes. Diana had been acting strange since the incident at Tiffany's, making calls at odd hours, asking questions about adoption lawyers. "Something happened today," Robert told his mother over dinner, while Diana was still at the hospital. "She fainted at Tiffany's." "Did she?" Margaret sipped her wine. "How convenient." "What do you mean?" "Nothing, dear. But perhaps it's time I shared what my investigators found about your wife's past." Across town, Tom Cooper helped his daughter with calculus homework while Mary prepared dinner. Their modest home was filled with love and laughter. "Dad, I met someone," Sarah announced. "His name is James. He's getting his MBA." Tom smiled, but his hand shook slightly. "A leftover from Vietnam." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. He wants to meet you both," Sarah continued. "And guess what? His father owns Peterson Real Estate." Mary dropped a plate in the sink. "Peterson? The big firm in Cleveland? You know them?" "No," Mary said quickly, exchanging glances with Tom. "Just the name." Later that night, Mary found Tom in their bedroom, staring at old papers. "Should we tell her?" he asked quietly. "About the adoption irregularities?" "No, she's happy. That's all that matters." Neither of them knew that across Beverly Hills, 3 separate phones were ringing with the same urgent message from Pastor John. "The FBI is investigating adoptions from 1980. Everything is about to come out." Diana lay in her hospital bed, making one last call to her lawyer. "I need everything you can find on Sarah Cooper," she whispered. "And handle it discreetly. If Robert finds out." She left the thread unfinished. Outside her window, a butterfly landed briefly on the sill, then flew away into the gathering darkness. The past was knocking, and soon everyone would have to answer. "I want to buy Tiffany's," Diana announced at the Sterling Enterprises board meeting. Robert stopped reading the quarterly reports. "You want to what?" "The Beverly Hills location. It's underperforming. I can turn it around." Board members exchanged glances. Diana had never shown interest in retail before. Her expertise was in real estate development. "Darling," Robert said carefully, "Tiffany's isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price." Later that day, Robert called his mother. Something's wrong with Diana. First the fainting spell, now this obsession with Tiffany's. "I'm handling it," Margaret replied. "The investigators found something interesting in Cleveland." Meanwhile, across town, Sarah sat in her business class, finalizing her presentation. Her project proposed a revolutionary concept: affordable luxury retail in working-class neighborhoods. It directly competed with Sterling Enterprises' latest development. "Miss Cooper?" her professor called. "You're presenting first." Sarah stood confidently. "My research shows that luxury retailers are missing a huge market." In the back of the classroom, James Peterson watched proudly. He hadn't told Sarah that his father's company was partnering with Sterling Enterprises, or that her project could destroy the partnership. At the Veteran Support Group, Tom Cooper struggled to focus. The memories were bad today. "Tom," the group leader noticed his distress. "Want to share?" "The adoption papers," Tom muttered. "They're coming for the papers." Mary, working her hospital shift, received an urgent call. Her latest cancer screening showed concerning results, but she couldn't tell Sarah. Not now, with everything going so well. Pastor John paced his office, staring at the adoption files. The FBI was asking questions about missing records, money that couldn't be traced. He had helped so many families, bent so many rules. His phone rang. It was Margaret Sterling. "I know what you did in 1980, she said without preamble. "And I know about Diana." "Mrs. Sterling, those records are confidential." "Nothing's confidential with enough money, Pastor. The question is, whose side are you on?" At the Peterson mansion, James confronted his father. Sarah Cooper's project could revolutionize retail. "It could bankrupt us," his father corrected. "The Sterlings will pull out if we support this." "Then I'll help her do it without you." Mr. Peterson laughed. "You sound like someone I knew once, a cleaning lady with big dreams." Diana sat in her office, reviewing the FBI's adoption investigation files. Her private investigator had discovered that Pastor John had placed over 50 babies without proper documentation. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Mrs. Sterling, thank you for the business advice. Can we meet again?" Before Diana could reply, Robert stormed in. "The board found irregularities in our accounts," he said. "We're being investigated for fraud." "That's impossible. I check everything personally." "Not everything, apparently. Mother thinks—" "Your mother needs to stay out of our business. She's trying to protect us." Diana's phone buzzed again. Pastor John, FBI asking questions. Margaret Sterling involved. The pieces clicked. Margaret wasn't just investigating Diana's past. She was orchestrating its exposure. At Tiffany's, Sarah helped James choose a ring. "It's not an engagement ring," he assured her. "Just a promise." Sarah touched her butterfly birthmark absently. "I should ask my parents first. They're traditional." Speaking of parents, James hesitated. "My father wants to meet you. He's having dinner with the Sterlings next week." At the Cooper house, Mary found Tom in the garage, surrounding by old boxes. "The adoption agency called," he said. "They're reviewing all cases from 1980. We did nothing wrong. We knew the paperwork wasn't right. Pastor John told us. We gave a baby a home," Mary interrupted. "That's all that matters." In her office, Diana made a decision. She dialed Sarah's number. "About that meeting. Are you free tonight?" "Actually, I'm having dinner with my boyfriend's father. At the Sterlings." Diana's heart stopped. "At my house?" "Yes, Mr. Peterson specifically requested it." The past wasn't just knocking anymore. It was breaking down the door. Diana opened her drawer, staring at the baby photo she'd kept for 20 years. Tonight, everyone who had shaped Sarah's destiny would be under one roof. The question was, who would be left standing when the truth finally exploded? Sarah sat in her car outside the Sterling mansion, fighting waves of nausea. The home pregnancy test had shown positive this morning. She and James had been careful, but, "God, please help me," she whispered, touching her cross necklace. The Coopers had raised her with strong Christian values. An unplanned pregnancy before marriage would break their hearts. Inside the mansion, Diana supervised the dinner preparations while Margaret watched from the doorway. "I know why you're pursuing Tiffany's," Margaret said quietly. "I know about Cleveland." Diana froze. "What are you talking about? I was there in 1980. I gave up a baby too." The serving spoon clattered to the floor. "You what? Why do you think I protected you all these years? Guided your career from the shadows?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I saw myself in you. The doorbell interrupted their conversation. Peterson entered first, followed by James and Sarah. Diana, Peterson boomed. Still as beautiful as when you mopped my floors. The room went silent. Robert looked between his wife and Peterson, confusion evident. You know each other? Sarah asked innocently. Before anyone could respond, Pastor John burst in through the kitchen door, face pale with panic. They're coming, he announced. The FBI has the adoption records. Sarah grabbed the back of a chair, suddenly dizzy. James reached for her, but she pulled away. I need to tell you something, she whispered. Not now, James pleaded. Dad's about to announce our engagement. Engagement? Sarah stepped back. I never agreed to... She swayed, then collapsed. Diana reached her first, cradling her head. Sarah's blazer slipped, revealing the butterfly birthmark. Peterson's eyes widened in recognition. That mark, I remember. Everyone out, Diana commanded. She needs air. As the room cleared, Margaret pulled Robert aside. There's something you need to know about your wife. In the kitchen, Pastor John confronted Peterson. You knew about Diana's baby all along? Of course. Why do you think I hired her as a cleaning lady? I needed leverage. Neither man noticed Tom Cooper in the doorway, his PTSD-trained instincts on high alert. Sarah woke on the Sterling's couch to find Diana holding her hand. I'm pregnant, Sarah whispered, and I found this in your study. She pulled out the old baby photo, showing the same butterfly birthmark she carried. Diana's world stopped. How did you... It doesn't matter. Sarah stood shakily. What matters is you've been lying to everyone. In the dining room, Margaret was finishing her revelation to Robert. Your wife was a teenage mother who abandoned her baby. I've been protecting her, guiding her career, making sure she succeeded. Why? Robert demanded. Because 20 years ago, I did the same thing. My baby was adopted through Pastor John's church. James, overhearing everything, stormed into the kitchen where his father was arguing with Pastor John. You used Sarah's project to destroy her career? Your own future daughter-in-law? Son, the Sterlings are our ticket to... She's pregnant, James shouted. Your grandchild. The room exploded in chaos. Sarah, hearing James's outburst, ran out the front door. Diana followed, leaving Robert staring at the baby photo that had fallen from Sarah's hand. Peterson grabbed James's arm. You'll ruin everything we've built. No. Tom Cooper stepped forward, his military bearing evident. You've ruined enough lives. Outside, Diana caught up to Sarah at the gate. Please, Diana begged. Let me explain. Explain what? How you've been manipulating my life? How everyone's been lying? Sarah touched her stomach protectively. I won't let my baby grow up in a web of lies. From the mansion's window, Margaret watched mother and daughter in the garden. Her phone buzzed, a text from the FBI. They had questions about a baby she'd given up in 1980. The truth was unraveling faster than anyone could control, and it was about to destroy everything they'd built. Sarah sat in the emergency room watching nurses rush past. The stress had triggered complications with her pregnancy. The baby's heartbeat is irregular, the doctor explained. You'll need complete bed rest. James paced the hallway, torn between Sarah and the chaos unfolding at the Sterling mansion. His father was threatening to expose everything unless he ended the relationship. Meanwhile, FBI agents surrounded Pastor John's church office. We have evidence of illegal adoption spanning 2 decades, Agent Wilson stated. Names were changed. Money can't be traced. Pastor John slumped in his chair. I was helping people. By selling babies to the highest bidder? At Sterling Enterprises, Robert faced the board of directors. The SEC is investigating fraud allegations, the chairman announced. We need answers, Robert. My wife handles those accounts, Robert replied numbly, still reeling from Margaret's revelations. Your wife was a teenage mother who gave up her child, Margaret interjected. I've been watching her since she was a cleaning lady. You've been manipulating everything, Robert realized. Why? Because she has my granddaughter. Peterson burst into the boardroom. That girl in the hospital, Sarah Cooper, she's Diana's daughter. Across town, Tom, Cooper's classroom erupted in chaos as memories of Vietnam overwhelmed him. "Get down!" he shouted at his stunned students. "Enemy fire!" the school principal called Mary, who was waiting for her own test results at the hospital. "Your cancer markers are elevated," her doctor had just informed her. "We need to start treatment immediately." But Mary's attention was on her phone. Messages about Sarah's pregnancy complications, Tom's breakdown, and FBI agents asking questions about Sarah's adoption. At the hospital, Diana slipped into Sarah's room while James was getting coffee. "I know you hate me," Diana began. "I don't hate you," Sarah interrupted. "I just don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed the truth from a stranger?" Before Sarah could respond, her monitors started beeping. Nurses rushed in as her blood pressure spiked dangerously. "She needs a transfusion," the doctor ordered. "Rare blood type," Diana stepped forward. "Test me. I'm her biological mother." James returned to find FBI agents interviewing Sarah's nurse. "We're investigating irregularities in her adoption records," they explained. "My father knew," James realized. "He knew everything." At the Cooper house, Mary found Tom sitting in Sarah's old room. "We did everything right," Tom whispered. "We loved her. We raised her. How can they take that away?" Mary sat beside him, holding her cancer diagnosis report. "We need to tell her everything, about the adoption, about my cancer, about your PTSD. It'll destroy her. Secrets are destroying her now." At Sterling Enterprises, Robert made a decision. "I'm offering myself to the SEC," he told the board, "in exchange for immunity for my wife." "You'd sacrifice everything?" Margaret asked. "For family?" "Yes." Peterson laughed coldly. "Family? Your wife's been lying for 20 years. And you've been blackmailing her for just as long," Robert countered. In Sarah's hospital room, the transfusion was working. Diana's blood was saving her daughter's life. Again. "Why did you give me up?" Sarah asked weakly. "I was 19, homeless. My mother had just died." Diana held Sarah's hand. "The Coopers could give you everything I couldn't. And now? Now I'll give up everything. My marriage, my company, everything. To protect you and your baby." Outside the room, James confronted his father. "If you press charges," James warned, "I'll testify about your illegal dealings." Peterson's face hardened. "You'd betray your own father?" "I'm protecting my family." James touched Sarah's hospital door. "This is my family now." Pastor John, released on bail, arrived at the hospital with shocking news. "Margaret Sterling," he announced. "She's your biological grandmother, Sarah. She gave up her baby, your father, in 1980. Same year Diana gave you up." The truth was finally out. But as Sarah's monitors started beeping again, everyone realized the price of secrets might be too high. The doctor rushed in. "We're losing them both." Diana gripped Sarah's hand, praying to a God she hadn't spoken to in 20 years. Some things, she realized, were worth losing everything for. Headlines exploded across Beverly Hills. Sterling Enterprises involved in adoption scandal. Prominent socialite secret past revealed. FBI investigates pastor's baby trafficking scheme. Sarah watched the news from her hospital bed, one hand protectively over her stabilized pregnancy, the other holding James's hand. Sterling stock dropped 60%, James reported. "They're calling it the scandal of the decade." Outside the hospital, reporters swarmed Diana as she arrived for her daily visit. "Mrs. Sterling, did you buy your way into Beverly Hills society? Was your marriage to Robert Sterling part of a cover-up? Did you know your mother-in-law was your daughter's grandmother?" Diana pushed through the crowd, her empire crumbling. Sterling Enterprises had lost major contracts. Their Beverly Hills mansion was on the market. They couldn't afford the payments anymore. In the hospital's chapel, Margaret Sterling knelt in prayer. "I gave up my baby to protect the family name," she confessed to Pastor John. "Now I've destroyed it anyway." God forgives, Pastor John replied. The question is, will our families? The Cooper house was being packed up. They couldn't afford the mortgage with Mary's cancer treatments and Tom's reduced teaching schedule. We're moving to a small apartment, Mary told Sarah during her hospital visit. But we're together. That's what matters. Tom, finally stable with new PTSD medication, stood up. We have something to tell you, Sarah, about your adoption. I know, Dad. The FBI showed me the files. Sarah reached for his hand. You paid extra to skip the waiting list. We were desperate for a child, Mary explained. Pastor John said there was a young mother. Diana, Sarah finished, and she was desperate too. At Sterling Enterprises, Robert faced the board one last time. I'm pleading guilty to the SEC charges, he announced. The company will survive. My wife's reputation might not. Your wife is a fraud, a board member spat. My wife built herself from nothing. That's the American dream. Robert stood. I resign, effective immediately. Peterson, watching his own empire collapse, made one last attempt to save himself. I'll testify against all of them, he told the FBI. Sterling, Pastor John, everyone. But when he saw Sarah's ultrasound photo on James's desk, his future grandchild, something broke inside him. Wait, he called to the agents. I need to revise my statement. Diana arrived at Sarah's room to find all the key players gathered. The Coopers, the Sterlings, James, Pastor John, and Peterson. We need to face this together, Sarah announced. All of us. The press will crucify us, Margaret warned. Let them, Robert said. Family matters more than reputation. Peterson stepped forward. I'll take full responsibility for the financial fraud. I forced Diana to manipulate accounts by threatening to expose her past. Dad? James stared in shock. I've spent 40 years destroying lives, Peterson admitted. It's time to make things right. Mary shared her own news. My cancer's spreading, but with Sarah's pregnancy, she couldn't finish. Mom, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me? Because you had enough to worry about. Diana made her decision. I'm selling everything. My properties, my jewelry, everything. We'll pay for Mary's treatment, save the Cooper's house, and start fresh. You'd give up everything you built? Margaret asked. I built an empire on secrets, Diana replied. I want to build a family on truth. The media frenzy intensified as Peterson confessed to decades of financial manipulation. Pastor John's adoption records revealed hundreds of families affected. But something unexpected happened. Families began coming forward, not to press charges, but to share stories of lives transformed by adoption, of children finding loving homes, of second chances. Sarah, watching from her hospital room, felt her baby kick. Your family has a complicated story, James said, touching her stomach, but it's a story of love. Even when we got it wrong, Diana added, we were trying to do right. Tom, his military training kicking in, stood guard at Sarah's door, protecting his daughter from reporters. Mary sat nearby, her cancer treatment schedule in hand, but her focus entirely on her family. Together, they would face whatever came next. The truth had cost them everything they thought mattered, but it had given them something priceless in return. The for sale sign went up in front of the Sterling mansion. Diana and Robert moved into a modest 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood. It's strange, Robert said, carrying in their last box. I feel lighter somehow. Diana looked around their new home. We don't need all that space, just each other. At the hospital, Mary started her first round of aggressive cancer treatment. The doctors were optimistic. Diana's sale of her Beverly Hills properties had funded access to experimental therapy. The side effects are brutal, Mary told Sarah during their daily visits. But I'm not going anywhere until I meet my grandchild. Sarah's pregnancy had stabilized. She and James moved into the Coopers' old house. Peterson had signed it over to them as part of his plea deal. Dad's different in prison, James told Sarah after visiting his father. He's at peace. Peterson had taken full responsibility for the financial fraud, protecting both Diana and Robert from prosecution. His confession detailed decades of manipulation and blackmail. Pastor John, awaiting his own trial, found an unexpected ally in Margaret. "We're starting a support group," Margaret announced during Sunday service, "for families affected by adoption. No more secrets." Tom Cooper returned to teaching, but something had changed. He started sharing his Vietnam experiences with his students, turning trauma into lessons about courage and healing. "Sometimes," he told his class, "the bravest thing is asking for help." The FBI investigation revealed that Margaret's own child, the baby she'd given up before Robert, had died years ago in a car accident. "I tried to control everything," Margaret told Diana, "to make up for the child I lost. I'm sorry." Diana found her at the church later, crying in the empty sanctuary. "You're still a grandmother," Diana said softly. "Sarah needs you." Robert, stripped of his corporate title, discovered an unexpected talent for teaching business ethics at the local community college. "I tell my students about our fall," he explained to Diana, "about choosing love over money." One morning, Sarah called everyone to the Coopers' old house, now her home with James. "We're having twins," she announced, "and we want to get married. Here, next month. Small ceremony." "But your condition," Mary started. "That's why," Sarah touched her growing belly. "I want all my family together, while we can." The wedding preparations brought unexpected healing. Diana and Mary planned the details together, two mothers sharing their daughter's joy. Tom's PTSD support group helped decorate. Margaret organized the catering. Robert and James handled the logistics. Even Peterson was allowed to attend under guard supervision. "Thank you," he told Diana at the rehearsal dinner, "for showing me what really matters." The night before the wedding, Sarah found Diana in the backyard. "I've been angry," Sarah admitted. "Not because you gave me up, but because you didn't trust me with the truth." "I was afraid," Diana replied. "Success became my shield, but it was empty without you. We're both pregnant," Sarah suddenly laughed. "Me with twins, you with a new life." Inside, Mary got promising news from her doctors. The treatment was working. "God's not done with me yet," she told Tom, who held her through the tears. Margaret, watching them, finally understood what she'd been chasing all these years. Not power or status, but this simple, messy, beautiful family love. Pastor John, out on bail for the wedding, led them all in prayer. "From ashes, Lord, you bring beauty," he said. "From brokenness, wholeness." Robert put his arm around Diana as they listened. "We lost everything," he whispered. Diana looked at their gathered family, birth and adopted, bound by love rather than law. "No," she corrected him. "We finally found everything that matters." Tomorrow, Sarah would marry James. Two families would become one, and their story would remind Beverly Hills that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or mansions. It's in the courage to face truth, the strength to forgive, and the faith to begin again. The Coopers' backyard transformed into a simple but elegant wedding venue. White chairs lined the grass, and Mary's prized rose garden provided the perfect backdrop. "Something borrowed." Margaret handed Sarah a delicate veil. "I wore this at my wedding." "Something blue," Mary added, pinning a butterfly brooch to Sarah's dress near her birthmark. "To honor where you came from." Diana watched from the doorway, remembering her own lavish wedding to Robert. This was different, real. Pastor John arrived early, his ankle monitor hidden under his suit pants. The judge had granted special permission for him to perform the ceremony. "Love redeems," he said during the final preparation. "Even my mistakes led to this moment." James stood with his father, who was flanked by two guards. Peterson straightened his son's tie with shackled hands. "I wish I could walk beside you," Peterson said quietly. "You are, Dad, by making things right." Tom Cooper, steady after months of therapy, prepared to walk Sarah down the aisle. But first, he had a surprise. "Diana should walk with us," he announced at the rehearsal. "Sarah has 2 fathers and 2 mothers. That's her blessing, not her burden." The wedding morning brought unexpected news. The FBI had discovered more about Margaret's past. "Your son," the agent told her, "the one you gave up, he didn't die in that car crash." Margaret gripped the kitchen counter. "What?" "There was a mistake in records. He's alive, living in Seattle." As guests arrived, Sarah felt her twins kick. The doctor had cleared her for the ceremony, but insisted she sit during most of it. "They're dancing already," she told James. "Like butterflies." Robert, now teaching ethics full-time at the community college, gave the opening speech. "When I lost my company, I thought I lost everything," he said. "Instead, I found my purpose, teaching others to choose right over easy." Mary, her hair growing back after chemotherapy, arranged flowers with her hospital nurses, who'd become like family. "The treatment's working," she told Diana. "I'll be here to help with those twins." The ceremony began. Tom and Diana walked Sarah down the aisle together, while James waited with Peterson and Robert. "Who gives this woman?" Pastor John asked. "We all do," the families answered in unison. During the vows, Sarah added her own surprise. "Our children will know all their grandparents," she declared. "The ones who gave us life and the ones who gave us love." Peterson broke down, his guards respectfully looking away. Margaret shared her news during the reception. "I'm going to Seattle," she announced, "to meet my son, to tell him the truth." "The whole truth?" Diana asked. "Yes, about everything. No more secrets." Tom gave a speech that moved everyone to tears. "War taught me to guard my heart," he said. "But Sarah taught me to open it. Now our family's bigger than ever." Mary danced with both her husband and Robert, her strength growing daily. "The doctors say I'm responding better than expected," she told Sarah. "Those grandbabies gave me something to fight for." James and Sarah left for a short honeymoon. The twins limited their travel options. But before leaving, they shared their own news. "We're converting the old Peterson office building," James announced, "into a center for families, adoption support, counseling, everything. The Peterson Cooper Family Center," Sarah added, "where secrets end and healing begins." Diana watched her daughter drive away, surrounded by her expanded family. "You did good," Robert whispered, taking her hand, giving her up, finding her, telling the truth. "We all did good," Diana replied, looking at their unlikely gathering. "We chose love." As the sun set, butterflies danced through Mary's rose garden. Tom held his wife close. Margaret planned her trip to Seattle. Peterson returned to serve his time, at peace with his choices. Pastor John, before returning to custody, blessed them one final time. "From broken pieces," he said, "God builds bridges." They were no longer defined by wealth or status or secrets. They were simply family, bound by truth and love and forgiveness. And that was worth more than all the mansions in Beverly Hills. Sarah's pregnancy reached 7 months when the complications started again. The hospital monitors beeped urgently as her blood pressure spiked. "The twins are in distress," Dr. Martinez explained. "We need to consider an emergency C-section." James called both families, who rushed to the hospital. Diana and Mary arrived first, followed by Tom and Robert. Margaret cut short her Seattle trip, where she'd been building a relationship with her long-lost son. "Not yet," Sarah pleaded. "They're too small." Peterson, granted temporary release due to the medical emergency, waited in the hallway with his guards. "Prayer circle," Pastor John announced, joining them on his day pass. The unlikely family joined hands, former enemies united in fear and hope. Dr. Martinez emerged from Sarah's room with updates every hour. The twins' heartbeat stabilized, then weakened, then stabilized again. "She needs complete tranquility," the doctor ordered. One visitor at a time. Mary went first, her own cancer battle giving her unique perspective. "Fight, baby," she whispered to Sarah. "Like I fought." Tom paced the hallway, his PTSD threatening to surface. Robert steadied him. "Deep breaths, Tom. Sarah needs you calm." Diana sat with James, who hadn't slept in days. "Tell me about the family center plans," she said, trying to distract him. "Construction starts next month," James replied automatically. "Dad's funding it from his assets." Peterson, overhearing, nodded silently. His prison sentence had brought unexpected peace and purpose. Margaret returned from making calls to Seattle. "My son's flying in," she announced. "He wants to meet his niece and the twins." The night stretched endlessly. Sarah's condition worsened. "We need to operate now," Dr. Martinez declared at dawn. "Wait," Sarah called weakly. "I want to say something to everyone." The families crowded into her room, guards allowing Peterson closer than regulations permitted. "When I learned about my adoption," Sarah began, "I thought my life was built on lies. But look at us now." She grabbed James's hand as another contraction hit. 2 sets of parents, 3 sets of grandparents, a family built on truth and forgiveness. Diana wiped tears. "Save your strength, sweetheart. No, listen. These babies will never doubt they're loved. By all of you," the monitors screamed. Dr. Martinez rushed in. "Everyone out. We're doing the C-section now." In the waiting room, the hours crawled. Mary led prayers. Tom held Diana's hand. Robert and Peterson talked quietly about the family center plans. Margaret's son David arrived, meeting his extended family under the most stressful circumstances. "Quite a story you all have," he observed, accepting coffee from Pastor John. Finally, Dr. Martinez emerged, smiling. "2 healthy girls," she announced. "Small, but fighters." James came out next, beaming through his exhaustion. "Sarah's okay," he reassured everyone. "And wait until you see." The families filed into the nursery viewing area. There, in identical bassinets, lay 2 tiny girls, each with a perfect butterfly birthmark on her right shoulder. "Impossible," the nurse whispered. "Miracles," Pastor John corrected. "God's signature." Mary clutched Tom's arm. "Our granddaughters." "All of ours," Peterson said softly. Diana stood between her husband and her daughter's adoptive parents, watching her granddaughters sleep. The babies were transferred to Sarah's room. She held them with James by her side, surrounded by 3 generations of a family that love had built. "Their names?" Margaret asked. Sarah smiled tiredly. "Faith and Grace." "Perfect," David said, meeting his niece and great-nieces in the same moment. As the sun rose over the hospital, the unlikely family clustered around Sarah's bed, marveling at the twin butterflies that proved some things were meant to be. They weren't the perfect family from a Beverly Hills magazine. They were better. They were real. 6 months after the twins' birth, the Peterson Cooper Family Center opened its doors in the renovated Peterson Real Estate Building. From this place that once held so many secrets, Sarah addressed the crowd at the opening ceremony, "We'll now spread truth and healing." The center gleamed with purpose. One wing housed adoption support services. Another offered counseling for veterans, led by Tom. The medical clinic, where Mary volunteered between treatments, provided care for underserved families. Diana managed the financial aid program, helping single mothers pursue education and career training. "I was once a teenage mom with nothing," she told her first group of clients. "Your past doesn't define your future." James oversaw operations while Peterson, serving his sentence, advised from prison. "We're helping 30 families already," James told his father during visits, each with their own story. Margaret split her time between Beverly Hills and Seattle, building relationships with both families. Her son David became a regular visitor, his own children playing with faith and grace. "Mom," he said during one visit. Our family tree is more like a forest. Robert's ethics classes at the community college became the most popular on campus. He often invited Peterson to speak via video conference. Learn from our mistakes, Peterson told the students. Success means nothing without integrity. Pastor John, serving house arrest, counseled families from his home office. God wastes nothing, he reminded visitors. Even our deepest wounds can bring healing to others. The twins grew stronger daily, their butterfly birthmarks a constant reminder of their unique heritage. They had Mary's gentle smile, Sarah's determination, and Diana's spark. 4 grandmothers, 4 grandfathers, and endless love, Sarah would tell them. That's your inheritance. Mary's cancer went into remission. Her doctors called it miraculous. It was the twins, she insisted. They gave me a reason to fight. Tom's PTSD support group expanded to 3 sessions weekly. His military precision found new purpose in organizing family events at the center. Structure helps healing, he explained. I learned that the hard way. 1 year after the scandal broke, a national news team visited the center. How did Beverly Hills' biggest scandal become its greatest success story? The reporter asked. Sarah, holding Grace while Diana cradled Faith, considered the question. We stopped hiding, she answered, started healing, and invited others to join us. The center's programs expanded. Margaret's connections brought corporate support. Peterson's case became a teaching tool in business ethics courses. Real wealth, Robert told his students, is measured in lives changed. Mary started a special program for grandparents, helping them navigate complex family dynamics. Love multiplies, she'd say. It doesn't divide. Diana and Sarah co-authored a guide for adoptive families, emphasizing honesty and open communication. Secrets burden, Diana wrote. Truth frees. The twins' first birthday celebration brought everyone together again. Peterson attended under guard, his sentence reduced for good behavior. Look what we built, he marveled, watching families fill the center's courtyard. Look what love built, James corrected. As the sun set over the celebration, Sarah gathered her extended family for a photo. This is your legacy, she told the twins. Not money or status, but truth, forgiveness, and family. Diana watched her granddaughters laugh in the arms of their many grandparents. We lost everything, Robert reminded her, echoing words from a year ago. And found what? Matters, Diana finished, touching Faith's butterfly birthmark gently. The center stood as testament to their journey, a place where secrets ended and healing began, where families found strength in truth, and where love proved stronger than shame. Their story, once Beverly Hills' biggest scandal, became its greatest lesson. Real wealth isn't in what you own, but in who you love and how well you love them. And that was a legacy worth more than all the fortunes they'd lost. Christmas Eve 2002. The Peterson Cooper Family Center buzzed with activity. Hundreds of families gathered for the annual holiday celebration, sharing stories of hope and transformation. 500 families helped this year, Sarah announced, reading from the center's annual report. Faith and Grace, now walking, toddled around her feet wearing matching butterfly print dresses. Diana, no longer wearing designer clothes but radiating genuine happiness, organized the food line where Mary supervised volunteer servers. Her cancer in full remission, Mary had become the center's most dedicated volunteer. Remember our first Christmas together? Mary asked Diana as they worked. When everyone's secrets were exploding? Now look at us, Diana smiled, watching Tom lead a group of veteran volunteers. His PTSD support group had become a model program, receiving national recognition. Peterson, recently released on parole, worked alongside his son, serving meals to families in need. His corporate skills now focused on expanding the center's reach. We're opening 3 new locations next year, he told Robert, who'd become the center's education director. Your ethics program is going national. Margaret arrived with David and his family from Seattle. Their relationship, once lost to secrets, had blossomed into genuine connection. "Grandma's here," the twins squealed, running to Margaret with their perfect butterfly birthmarks visible on their shoulders. Pastor John, his sentence completed, led the Christmas service in the center's chapel. "1 year ago," he began, "this family stood divided by secrets. Today they stand united by truth. And look what God has done through their testimony." The evidence surrounded them. Former clients now served as mentors. Single mothers graduated from training programs. Adoptive families found healing through openness. James took the podium next. "The Peterson Cooper Center started as our redemption story," he said. "It's become a movement." Sarah joined him, their third child growing visible beneath her simple dress. "We've helped families recover from addiction," she continued. "Supported veterans healing from trauma, guided mothers choosing adoption, reunited families separated by secrets." Diana stood with Robert, remembering their mansion, their wealth, their carefully constructed facade. "We're happier now," Robert whispered, as if reading her thoughts. His community college teaching job brought more satisfaction than running Sterling Enterprises ever had. The celebration continued into evening. Mary and Tom danced despite her occasional fatigue. Peterson played with his grandchildren, making up for lost time. Margaret shared photos of David's family with anyone who would look. Pastor John counseled families in quiet corners, while volunteers served holiday meals to hundreds. Later, as snow began falling, the extended family gathered in the center's main hall. "Time for our tradition," Sarah called, gathering everyone around the Christmas tree. Each family member hung a butterfly ornament, symbolizing their journey from secrets to truth. Diana watched Faith and Grace place their ornaments with help from all their grandparents. "Tell us the story again," Faith requested, climbing into Diana's lap. "Which one?" Diana asked. "About the cleaning lady who became rich?" "No," Grace interrupted from Mary's arms. "About the family that lost everything and found love." Sarah smiled at her daughters. "That's the same story, sweetie, and it's still being written." As if to prove her point, a young mother entered the center, seeking shelter from the snow. Within minutes, the family mobilized. Mary offered medical care, Tom found emergency housing, Diana arranged job training. "This is what wealth really means," Robert observed, watching their coordinated response. Peterson nodded, bouncing his grandson on his knee. "Took us long enough to learn it." Margaret, surrounded by children she'd once given up and grandchildren she'd nearly lost, wiped happy tears. "The true American dream," she said softly, "isn't about rising to the top. It's about lifting others as you climb." 5 years later, 2007, the center's influence had spread nationally. Diana and Sarah's Guide for Adoptive Families became a bestseller. Robert's ethics curriculum was taught in universities nationwide. The twins, now in kindergarten, inherited their family's passion for helping others. Their classroom projects always involved butterfly themes and family stories. Mary remained cancer-free, her medical expertise helping countless families access care. Tom's veteran program expanded to 30 cities, healing invisible wounds through understanding and support. Peterson, fully reformed, advocated for corporate responsibility, his own story serving as powerful testimony. James managed the growing network of centers while maintaining their founding principles of truth and service. Pastor John, though retired, still counseled families, his office walls covered with photos of healed relationships and reunited families. Margaret split her time between her expanded family, cherishing relationships once lost to pride and secrets. On the center's 5th anniversary, Sarah gathered everyone for a celebration. "We've helped over 5,000 families," she announced. "But numbers don't tell the real story." She gestured to the crowd. Former clients now serving others, broken families made whole, addicts celebrating recovery, veterans finding peace, single mothers achieving dreams. "This is the real American dream," Diana concluded, holding her granddaughters close, not rising alone but lifting others, not hiding our scars but using them to heal others, not in what we own but in what we give. The family stood together, Diana and Robert, Sarah and James, Mary and Tom, Peterson, Margaret, Pastor John, David, and all their children, living proof that love is stronger than shame, truth more powerful than secrets, and family more valuable than fortune. As the twins released butterflies into the garden, their birthmarks matching the wings taking flight, Diana remembered that desperate teenage mother in Cleveland giving up her baby for a better life. "You did give her a better life," Robert said, reading her thoughts. "Just not the way you planned." Sarah hugged her biological and adoptive parents together. "The best life," she corrected, "because it's real and true and ours." Outside, more families arrived seeking help. The work continued. The legacy grew, and the butterflies danced in the garden, reminding them all that the most beautiful transformations often start with letting go. The true American dream wasn't in their lost mansion or fallen empire. It was here, in healed hearts, restored families, and love multiplied through generations. And that was worth more than all the fortunes in Beverly Hills. That evening, after the celebration, the family gathered for a private dinner at Sarah and James's home. The twins had one more surprise for everyone. "We wrote a school play," Faith announced, pulling out hand-drawn scripts. "About butterflies?" Peterson asked, smiling. "About our family," Grace corrected. "About second chances." The adults watched as the twins performed their simple play, acting out their family's journey with childlike wisdom. They portrayed Diana as a cleaning lady, Mary fighting cancer, Tom battling PTSD, and Peterson finding redemption. And then, Faith declared, everyone learned that love is bigger than mistakes. Sarah held James's hand, touching her growing belly. Their third child was due in spring, another girl according to the ultrasound. "We've already seen the birthmark," she revealed. The butterfly tradition continues. Diana looked around the room at faces that had once been enemies, now family. Robert discussing education programs with Peterson. Margaret showing David old photos. Mary and Tom planning next year's veteran support expansion. Pastor John, who'd stayed for dinner, raised his glass. "When I first came to Beverly Hills," he said, "I saw wealth everywhere but love nowhere. Now I see the opposite." The center had become more than a refuge. It was a beacon of hope, showing that true transformation was possible. Former clients returned as success stories, the addict now 5 years clean, the homeless veteran now helping others find housing, the single mother now running her own business. The twins' play ended with everyone holding butterfly cutouts. "Because butterflies show us," Grace explained with 6-year-old certainty, "that changing isn't bad, it's beautiful." Later that night, as the family prepared to leave, a knock came at the door. A teenage girl stood there, shivering, clearly pregnant and afraid. Without hesitation, the family mobilized one last time. Mary checked her vital signs. Diana called the center's emergency housing coordinator. Sarah shared her own story of unexpected pregnancy and found family. "See?" Faith whispered to Grace, watching. "Just like our play. Love is bigger than mistakes." The girl, watching this family in action, began to cry. "I thought I was alone," she said. "You're not alone anymore," Diana assured her, remembering her own tears in that Cleveland hospital. "You found your family. You just didn't know it yet." As the snow fell outside, the circle of love that had started with one mother's sacrifice 27 years ago expanded once again. The true American dream, they had learned, wasn't a destination but a journey, one best traveled together. And somewhere in the garden, butterflies slept in the snow, waiting to spread their wings again, just like the countless stories of hope and transformation that would continue to unfold at the center, proving that every ending could become a new beginning when love led the way. The real miracle, they all realized, wasn't in the matching birthmarks or the recovered fortunes, or even the healed relationships. It was in the simple truth that love, when given away, only grows stronger. And that was the greatest wealth of all. If you enjoyed this story of redemption, love, and second chances, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Diana's position? Have you ever experienced a moment when losing everything led to finding what truly matters? Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful butterflies emerge from the darkest cocoons. See you in our next story.